Welcome to Film and Page. I'm Dominic, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the audiobook Who Stole Feminism? How Women Have Betrayed Women by Christina Hoff Sommers. So this is something that I've been wanting to try out for a while, is audiobooks. And I've always had this weird aversion to them because in my mind it's so hardwired that a book is something that was meant to be read and not listened to. But I've grown extremely tiresome of my iTunes playlist while I'm driving to work and stuff like that. So I decided to try some audiobooks because a little while ago I wanted to get Dune on audiobook, and I found it was cheaper to get it if I signed up for Audible. Now, how Audible works, it's $14 a month and you get a credit for an audiobook each month. So I didn't use any of the credits for quite a few months. I actually have like 6 of them now. So I decided, well, maybe I should use up some of these credits and download some audiobooks and listen to them on my commute to work and home again. So this is one that I wanted to try out first. It's a book that I wanted to read for a while. And I don't really read a lot of overtly political books, but every now and then I will read them. And the other thing about the audio books is it's a chance for me to try out books that are kind of like outside the genres I usually read. And I usually will read like the main two is horror and science fiction and fantasy. That's the big three. But I do like to go outside of it and do some true crime and some political stuff as well. So the whole point of this book is the book is about, it goes into the history of feminism, but it talks about how at one point feminism kind of branched off from each other, and it branched off into 2 groups. And in the 2 groups are referred to in the book, the first group is referred to as equality feminists or equity feminists. They were like the more classical feminists. And then another group formed later on and kind of broke away, the gender feminists or the intersectional feminists. And they were the more radical branch, and they kind of seized control of the whole movement during the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And so the book does a pretty good job of going through the history of that. And the book talks about how this form of radical feminism has actually hurt women's movements in certain ways, and how feminism has made a lot of great strides in society and with women and stuff, but it's almost like the gender feminists, or the gender warriors as they are referred to in the book, almost like the precursor to the social justice warrior. Some of their ways, radical ways, actually end up hurting women, and there's a few examples of that in the book. And also, not only that, but it focuses a lot on the American education system. And so that's what the book focuses on. So the feminism, the work towards equal rights, was kind of hijacked by the more radical group. And so going through this book and listening to it, I have to say, one thing that really struck out. Now, this book was written in 1994 or 93, I think. And so almost 30 years ago. And the author talks about how she went to these, because now the author of this book is a feminist, left-wing feminist, Democrat, and would go to these feminist seminars or feminist conventions all the time, and talked about some of the stuff that went on there. And listening to the stories of what went on these feminist conventions and stuff like that, this book is so current day Twitter. Like with all the craziness that goes on Twitter, and with all the SJWs or the radical left or whatever you want to call them, it could have been written today. Like, it's so mainstream. So a lot of this stuff that we see and I've critiqued it in my videos and stuff, this overt or hyper political correctness, or political correctness gone right off the rails. Like, a lot of people are now aware of this, but they've only been aware of it, like, I guess the mainstream people, or just the general population, have only really been aware of it like I would count myself among that, maybe like the last 10 years or 6 years, something like that. And but all the stuff that we see going on, none of it is new. It all started decades ago, but it was all kind of like insulated. It was all happened on university campuses, and so it was all inside of these bubbles and kind of remained contained. It kind of worked its way through academia and then through governments, and then slowly through the corporate world. But for the most part, it kind of stayed insular. But now we've seen it's really exploded. It's like everywhere now. It's everywhere. Intersectional feminism or intersectionality is everywhere. It's woven its way, percolated right through everything. But you can see, you can track it. This book does a good job of tracking it and giving you the history of it. And so that aspect, it's a very interesting book to listen to. And the author has to do or should do a follow-up book written now and to look at like where they were in 93 to where we are now. And I think one of the big things that really helped intersectionalism like spread like wildfire in the last decade is social media. For sure, social media. Social media helps a lot of things spread, because before the internet, people were like stuck in bubbles. It was harder to find other people that had the same interests in you before the internet. But so there's that. So as I'm reading the book, one of the reoccurring things the book kind of goes over and over again is there will be a study or something done on how women are, okay, like one they gave in the book was, I do believe it was like something like anorexia. And then the study showed that, millions of, like hundreds of thousands of women were dying from anorexia. But somehow that wasn't the case. The original study didn't actually say that. But when these intersectional feminists got hold of the study, they kind of twisted the facts around and wrote about it in papers to make the problem seem way worse than men. Way worse than what for women, what it actually was. And that's like a reoccurring theme. Studies are taken, or really crappy studies are done, but actual legit studies are taken with actual numbers, and they'll take those numbers but then kind of fudge the facts on what that study means or bury parts of the study, and then just to make the problem seem way worse than what it is. And then in return, they get a lot of funding from the government, and so they're able to start create all these administration jobs and stuff like that on university campuses. So it's actually extremely lucrative, the victimhood market, as it's as you can see when as it's shown in this book when you listen to it. And so there's that. So there's a lot of that in every chapter. The author will look at a certain study that was done that is a problem for women, but then these gender feminists will take it and twist it around and make the problem seem 100 times worse, or make a problem when there wasn't one to begin with, kind of thing. And then they end up getting funding from senators and all that. And basically, a lot of people are lining their pockets with this kind of stuff. So that's what the bulk of the book is. But then the other thing it talks about is how the American education system is suffering because of this. Because a lot of the gender feminists, from what the author was talking about, said that the gender feminists believe that education will be improved if gender equality is achieved in academia. And somehow that will solve the problem of American students underperforming other students around the world. But that won't help, because even if you achieve gender equality, the quality of the education hasn't improved at all. And so that's not going to improve the educational system. And so there's a lot of good examples and stuff given, like compared to Japanese students, how Japanese students blow away the American students in math and things like that. So that's one big theme in the book that's talked a lot about. And the other way is how this kind of like gender feminism actually hurts other women. And the best example, and this was actually a really eye-opening one for me, and it stood out in the book big time. It was the chapter about rape on college campuses and university campuses. Now, it's something I was never really aware of until the last 7-8 years, because of social media, right? but I guess it's been going on for a long time. But it was like almost like a rape hysteria. So these women would go to these centers and say rape is a problem, and use misleading questionnaires or leading questions to make it seem like a much bigger problem what it actually is, so they can get funding to create rape crisis centers on university campuses and have counselors there and create even more administration jobs and all that kind of stuff. So all the money that the government has goes to that. All the money allocated for that sort of thing goes to the university. But here's the thing. Say a given city, all the money's going to the university, but in that exact same city, not nowhere near the university area, in the more poorer, more rundown parts of the city where rape actually is a big problem, the rape crisis centers there don't get nearly as much funding because it's all going to the university campuses. So it's like all these upper class women kind of looking out for themselves, and then the lower class people being left behind because the middle class ones got more power and they have more positions in government and in university, and they can make a much louder noise. Where they said like the problem is almost non-existent on the university campuses, or if it is, it's very low compared to these neighborhoods where it actually is a problem. They don't get the same funding, so those women suffer because of it. And that's how that's one example of how the movement kind of hurts women as it goes along. And the other interesting thing in this book is you see the origin of a certain argument. And I see this in pop culture all the time with fans. Like, just pick a name, especially with Star Trek and current day Marvel and stuff like that. So if you don't like Rey as a character, then the only reason you don't like her, especially if you're a guy, is because you're a sexist. And the same thing with Star Trek Discovery. If you don't like new Star Trek Discovery, you're against diversity and you're a bigot. That argument, it's interesting because you can see the origin of that type of argument when I was listening to that book. And it became like a go-to for the gender feminists whenever they did a study or anything, and experts or other people would confront them on it or challenge them on it. That's a way it was a technique they would use to actually shut down any criticism of their studies. Oh, well, then you don't believe women, or you're sexist, or whatever. That's how it was. So, and you can see how that argument goes all the way. Now it's permeated right down to pop culture now. So that was really, really, interesting to hear that being talked about in the book as well. And so you can see the origin of that argument. The other interesting thing that this book talks about is it's almost like a cliche now. I know a lot of people use it. It's kind of a worn out term, the get woke, go broke type thing. You hear a lot of it now, but even that's not new, because way back in the 90s, it talks about how a lot of feminists wanted to change or almost like invade the romance novel industry, and they actually succeeded back in the 90s. But they met a lot of resistance from the authors, because the romance novel industry was an industry that was dominated by women. All the publishers were women, and all the writers were women, and all the people buying the books were women. And so they wanted to change it and make the male lead less of a toxic male, I guess. That terminology didn't exist back then, so the author didn't say that. But if it was written today, it would be the male toxic male. Because he was like an alpha male, Fabio posed for all those covers and things like that. They wanted to deconstruct that, and it didn't work at all, and those novels didn't sell at all, and the authors, and they actually resisted it and put a stop to it in their industry. Where you can see that happening today, but people think of it as something that's just happened today when it comes to things like that. Like you can see it where when they do this, like The Last Jedi and stuff like that, where they do this, try to deconstruct it and all this kind of stuff, is what they were trying to do with the romance novels. You can see they did it with The Last Jedi, and then I know a lot of people are fans of that movie, but the numbers don't lie. It didn't perform nearly as well as the first one, and it just kind of sunk that trilogy. And it's definitely the weakest link when it comes to movies. But you can see where a lot of this stuff that people think are new going on right now, it's not new. Like the old saying goes, there's nothing new under the sun. So the other thing about this book is it is It's a lot to keep track of, though. There's a lot of names, a lot of numbers, and so this is a very interesting topic that I'm definitely going to want to listen more about or learn more about in the future. And it's always good to kind of broaden your knowledge and figure out the origins of all this kind of stuff that we see running crazy today and things like that. So I don't really read a lot of political books, but I have a couple Christopher Hitchens ones down the road that I want to listen to, and but that'll probably be a while. But now I've actually just finished my second audiobook. Now I want to space the political ones apart because I find politics kind of mentally draining and stuff like that. So I need something different afterwards. So I did go to something different after this book, but it was way more mentally draining, way more depressing than this book. This book was interesting, but at the same kind of emotionally draining because it is like about politics. But the next one it takes the cake. It's a true crime one, and it is a horrendous story. So that's the one I'm going to be reviewing next. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I will see you at the next one. I'd like to say thank you to all of my subscribers. I appreciate you all in helping this channel grow. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when new videos are uploaded.